Welcome to the Accenture First Tuesday event at the historic Hotel Teufelhof in Basel, Switzerland, one of our established business platforms for executives. In today's topic, experts and senior executives will discuss the rethinking of international development in a converging world.
I've been talking about things like convergence economy for some time, and we've been talking about public-private partnerships and how business is getting more engaged in the development sector in general. I guess when we put together this paper, that is a paper of a point of view, it's not right or wrong, we're really putting it out there for debate, we're trying to go beyond just saying there's a blurring boundaries, we're trying to go beyond just saying there's some public-private partnerships to something that is a more fundamental disruptive force in convergence. Something that is actually not just going to blur the boundaries, but fundamentally redefine the roles, the structures, and indeed the actors when it comes to who is doing what in delivering development outcomes.
Well, Dodgy, let's come to you next then, because can it ever be about outcome? It's always going to be about profit, isn't it?
You
Has
have
to be.
Profit for the private sector, of course, is one of the governing mandates that we have. But we're also a mission-driven company, and our mission is to care and cure. And what we see is the traditional ways of thinking about what seems like a dichotomy or is rapidly breaking down. If we just take the example of emerging markets, here we have the largest concentration of the global population, kind of 5 billion plus people. And we have the double disease burden of both infectious diseases and non-communicable diseases, which have been growing at a breakneck speed. And that's undermining the economic development and the poverty alleviation goals of the Millennium Development Goals and national governments. What we see and what many others see is that it's only by reconceiving the way we go to market through innovative partnerships, innovative new business models geared to the needs of lower income segments of the market, that we can both address the unmet social needs and at the same time use that as a way of fueling further business growth at a time that is very challenging from our traditional markets perspective in Europe and the US.
And I think as you start to look at a sector like food and nutrition, you realize that 90% of the population either they grow their own food or they buy it, but they're all in the marketplace. They don't get it from governments. And so, I think this led this, whole area to start to look at what are the kind of new partnership arrangements that would crowd in the private sector more effectively, and that would bring in other stakeholders and government. Because I think, one of the interesting things about the convergence idea is that it comes at a time where, a lot of the old paradigms we have are not working. A lot of the architecture that we have in the world, whether it's governments or the UN system, seem very outdated and seem unable to cope with the challenges that we face today. And so, I think it really touches on an important new paradigm that's coming. I think we're very much at the beginning of it. I think, government is very uncomfortable with sitting down with the private sector still in lots of places. Private companies are still looking for, okay, how do I can do this under corporate social responsibility, it's not too much risk, doesn't affect the bottom line, but now you're telling me it only really makes sense if I move it into my core business. So what does that really mean? What's it going to cost? And then, I think some companies do see that if they are doing societal good, it is going to help their bottom line.
Well, let's bring Matthias in. How important have you found partnerships are and the work the Red Cross is doing?
A couple of reflections. The first one is I very much would echo what the other three have said about the order of the day is to work together. I think there is really a growing realization in all sectors of life and society that one sector alone cannot tackle and overcome some of the major challenges we face today, whether it's hunger, whether it's climate change related, or even conflict related. So I think there we would probably all very quickly agree, and across sectors with government, etc. My question remains whether we can bring that to scale in such a way that it really matters and that it's fast enough. Again, my question is, to all of us really, will we be able to bring that to scale in such a way that we can really, in a serious manner, tackle climate change? And I share a little bit your question as to whether our institutional interests, whether it's making profit or serving humanity or whatever it is, really can, be compromised in such a way that we really work together in the convergent.
By the time we finish this discussion from when we started, Nestle will have sold somewhere in the world, to 50 million consumers. That might be water, it might be, breast milk substitute, it might be nutritious food, I don't know. But 50 million, that reach, that scale is significant. IKEA, I believe, use more water in a day than the population of the entire of Sweden. So if you're going to make differences and really affect systems the way that Convergence needs to, I think you need to tap into that latent power beyond a checkbook or beyond a one-off project. And so, I mean, the last thing I would say just is on this ecosystem idea, we talk in the Convergence paper around ultimately needing to get to a marketplace for development outcomes, an agnostic marketplace that brings together different players. I think it's partly about business doing better business, making food that's more nutritious, making medicines that people need. Sometimes it will be about partnerships, but sometimes it will actually be about new business models, new hybrid organizations. They might be created by NGOs, they might be created by the Red Cross, where you co-invest and co-create these new business models. I think GAIN's a hybrid organization that's not really a business, and it's certainly not a UN agency, and it's about market forces, and you work with business. I think we'll need more of these things. And also, bringing together maybe companies that are maybe in a different value chain. I think to do something powerful in food might involve, a market opportunity for a Vodafone, for example, to come in and look at how you get pricing information to farmers, or it might be about microfinance or microinsurance. So I think we can create partnerships that are symbiotic, but also I think we will need to see new forms, almost a fourth sector that starts to take from the first three sectors to create new models, new thinking, delivered by different outputs, not just profit. Yeah. Profit might be part of it, but it might not be part of it.
To the point that you raised, Sophie, about how can it work, with profit on the one hand and different interests on the other. It's about carving out those kind of areas where there is that shared goal. We've been working with the likes of Google, Vodafone, the Tanzanian Ministry of Health, the Kenyan Ministry of Health, to develop scalable new business solutions, e-health solutions that help solve previously systemic, intractable problems in the sub-Saharan African's healthcare system. So stocks that were of medicines, life-saving medicines that were previously systemically out of stock, are now managed much more effectively. And this is something that they can then sell into the market as a viable new product and service. And it's something that actually solves a problem that we'd been grappling with for years. And it was only through pooling our healthcare expertise with their e-health expertise with Google's and the Ministry of Health's kind of capabilities as well, that thing was able to come to fruition.
I think one of the key lessons is if you want to go to scale, you need a lot of soft money that is able to provide a lot of the risk capital, because I think a lot of companies are not prepared to risk their own money to reach the poor. Going the last mile, it's expensive. And a lot of the consumers you want to reach do not have the purchasing power to pay for value-added products. And so I think it's, it depends. These partnerships are very much around delivery. If you're talking about research and development, it's a very different types of partnerships. But I think to go to scale, there's a lot of enablers that need to be in place that aren't there yet. And concessional money, innovative financing mechanisms. You need some incentive systems. I mean, corporations aren't in the food sector, for example, aren't rated on terms of are they providing good nutrition?
My serious point here is I think part of getting change about is education, awareness building. I think we've talked about catalytic moments that come about when people see there is value in doing something differently, not just for me, it's good for business, it's good for development. I think crises are often catalytic moments. I mean, we haven't reflected much on the Arab Spring, or some people call it something different now, or what happened on Wall Street a couple of months earlier. I think crisis points force people into action. Some of the strongest advocates and governments that do something about climate change are small island states, because they know if we don't get it under control, they will disappear as countries. So I think, that's sort of negative motivation. But I think that needs to be harnessed also, as it were. And that's where I think, all institutions, I wouldn't rely on one global body that regulates all of this. I think I'm not into UN bashing, but I think the UN has demonstrated the limitations of that. It's brought good stuff to the table, but it's demonstrated the limitation of trusting one global body to fix it all. I really think it needs to be a hybrid, and that's where I think we agree. Convergence is around thinking and changing your ways of working rather than entrusting one institution to regulate it all.
What do you think the development landscape is going to look like 10 years from now, given where we are now and what's ahead?
Well, I just came from meeting the World Economic Forum this morning and hearing Klaus Schwab talk about there's like 100% chance we're going to have some cataclysmic event in the next 5 years. So I wasn't. Once he added Europe and Greece and stalemate in the U.S. and other things. I think I'm fairly positive. That. If we are able to move out of this economic crisis that we've been in the last few years, that this move towards a more this more convergent model, this approach where you're starting to see a lot more partnership models and people are very clear on what value is and are working on that. I think that will come. I think one of the reasons it will come is because the existing model isn't working. We have seen some successes in areas like global health, for example. I mean, some very big successes, but it's been new investment models that have come in and made that happen. It hasn't been traditional aid.
So 10 years from now, given the economic environment companies are operating in, do you think companies will be having an equal impact as NGOs in terms of development, or still just contributing?
I would venture to say bigger. But there's two different measures. One is the corporate sector having a bigger role than NGOs. But the more important benchmark is kind of what is needed in terms of healthcare, in terms of poverty, in terms of water, climate change, etc. And that's the benchmark by which we should measure ourselves. And by that benchmark, I think we'll still be somewhat behind.
50-50?
No, I think what we will see more and more is investment into national and local structures and initiatives. I think what is over is the time of sadly in some ways, but the traditional model is gone and the traditional players will change. I really think the NGO scene as we see it today will not exist in 10 years and will be swept away by or replaced by a combination of local initiatives, whether they are more commercially driven or more socially driven. That, I think, is combined with importantly leadership at that level.
There is a fundamental thinking going on, I say, introspection in the business community about the role of business, in broader society. And I think we have to get from being on the back foot and defending the actions of whether it's banks or whether it's trading food to make a little bit of money in a sort of roulette game, to actually saying business can do good. It can start to solve some of these societal problems while maybe making money. And over the next 10 years, if 6 out of the top 10 fastest growing economies are in Africa, we're going to see business going in there, but with a different kind of business model from the one that's been successful over the last 10 or 20 years in northern markets. It's going to be different, it's going to be innovative, it's going to be large and small, and yes, there may well be an emergence of things that have some attributes of a business, have some attributes of an NGO, have some attributes of a government agency, but there's something different again. And that for me is the vision in 2020, with many, many more people lifted out of poverty, many, many more people with access to healthcare, nutrition, many, many more people with access to education. So that would be my optimistic tone to end on.
Well, we will end on that optimistic tone. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution from the floor, and greatest thanks, of course, to our panellists.